We've been working through this series of practices and information regarding mindfulness and communications. This applies not only to your most intimate relationships, but to anyone with whom you have regular and need meaningful communication. Today's session revolves around some additional techniques and tactics you can employ and consider when you're in a situation where mindful communications is important. In the tradition, what they would suggest is that mindful communications are always important, even in the most mundane of our conversations. Hi, I'm Steve from Steve White Yoga, bringing you the application of yoga to manage your health, improve your relationships, and balance your life. Come on with me, let's take a look at today's session and see what we find out. All right, so we continue in our ongoing series that now is constituted by 4 sessions called Transforming Relationships. And today I chose Seeing Compromise. And I chose that intentionally, the difference between seeing and seeking, because sometimes you can seek without seeing, I guess. I don't know. I had a reason for it at the time, and I felt it was sort of profound, but it's completely escaped me now. So never mind. Forget I ever said that. So compromise is, by the notion of the yoga world, compromise is first and foremost our responsibility. That means you or me waiting for compromise to occur because someone else relents or waves the white flag or, backs down or decides to have the first kind words to say if the interaction is heated. And I'm not suggesting that all interactions have to be or should be heated, but it happens, right? So the suggestion made in the yoga world is, take responsibility and don't worry about what the other person does, because you can't control it, even though sometimes we think we can. Or maybe even sometimes we have some limited amount of success in controlling, the thoughts, actions, behaviors of other people. Ultimately, we form our best version of ourselves when we take responsibility and just go with what we've got and, sort of let the chips fall as they may. So when we accept responsibility ourselves to open to possibility, when we sort of relieve our partner in communication, whoever it might be, of the obligation to initiate or to capitulate, we greatly reduce the opportunity to have a long-term high-functioning relationship. So again, taking it on is perhaps the best course of action. I'll say this at the outset, that compromise sometimes means walking away from a situation for the moment, or maybe even for a long time, to allow the right space to sort of come into being, to materialize, to find our best reaction, our best interaction in a situation. So I'm just going to go through quickly something that we looked at on Tuesday, and everyone who signed up today also was on Tuesday. So I won't belabor the point, but it's just to sort of establish the framework based to sort of get us going in the right direction here. So you'll recall perhaps that there are 2 principles that I'm pulling from the yoga world. One is called samskara, and it's kind of forms the foundation of both the philosophy and the psychology of yoga. And samskara is translated often as being a habitual pattern. And this can be a pattern of physical behavior, it can be a pattern of emotional behavior or intellectual behavior, or really ultimately even spiritual behavior, they would say in the tradition. So we, according to the yoga world, are all essentially this big bundle of energy and habits that are derived from the energy. And unexamined, those habits may take us in the wrong direction or wrong directions for the entirety of our lives and affect our entire physical, psychological, physiological, social, and spiritual being. Or What yoga really offers is the ability to examine these habits, to surface them, examine them, and to make intelligent and meaningful decisions about whether something is serving us or not serving us. And so that's samskara. And then viveka is the ability to discriminate, or discernment, it's sometimes translated as. So this is the idea that we develop a place and a space where we can take a little more thoughtful approach to how we're behaving, what we're thinking about, how we're processing a situation. And then we have these three principles that are drawn from this book on mindful communications that I've been partially using as a basis for these talks. So awake body is one that is in the present moment, able to pay attention. Tender heart suggests the ability to be able to empathize. And open mind is an honest, open curiosity and even insightfulness in the context of a situation where we're communicating with someone important to us. So this set of principles is really when we're sort of in the driver's seat of a situation, and the driver's seat of our relationships, I should say. Not in a controlling way, but in a controlled way. So we can be open to communication in both our reception, how we're receiving information, and how we're responding. Open to the entire experience of the interaction and not just attached to an outcome, which is sort of a natural tendency that we all have. Have you ever been dead set, for instance, against doing something that your partner in communication really wanted to do, or not doing something that they didn't want to do? And through time or consideration or discussion, done a complete 180 yourself. So, you were not in favor or in favor of doing something, and the other person was at the opposite end of the spectrum, and something changed, something shifted. That's sort of where we're going today. So it doesn't suggest being assertive necessarily, and it doesn't suggest being submissive necessarily. I know a number of people, and I don't think this is a sexist thing to say, but most of them are women who went through periods of their life where they were sort of agreeable and submissive and whatever you want, honey, if it was a honey or whatever, and, sort of meek. And then they underwent some kind of a change and recognized that that wasn't serving them well, and then sort of flipped to the absolute opposite extreme and became very rigid and at least assertive, almost aggressive. And so what we're looking for is the balance here. It's not submission, it's not aggression, it's not being meek, it's not being rigid, it's being open. And so everybody has the experience of being in a position where they have a position, they've taken a position, and they want to maintain that position through hell or high water, right? Through thick and thin. And there is a certainty of something that's fortified by rationality or emotion or both, and an interaction with your communication partner that either can and will serve to sort of enforce that certainty of your position, or reverse it or revise it. And what we're looking for really ultimately is the revision. And that may sometimes mean acceding to somebody else's wishes if it still serves us, and that sometimes means holding our position, but coming at it from less a position of reactivity, from a standpoint of reactivity. That's the idea. So here are our three lights. I've just decided a few hours ago to call them conditions instead of lights, because I hate red light, green light, yellow light. So we're going to call it condition green, which is one in which we're open and receptive. And in that emotional environment, we are well prepared to enter any interaction. And it doesn't have to be one in which there's conflict necessarily. I'm using these as examples, but not suggesting that that's the only situation that requires being open and receptive. The hope is that we can be this through all of our interactions, through any important, meaningful relationship that we have. So that's condition green. And then if we're vulnerable and guarded, that would be a yellow condition. And then finally, if we're distracted and or closed, emotionally or intellectually, then the thought would be that that's a situation where delay is probably the best tactic, unless you're an extremely skilled communicator. So our work is to recognize on the spot in an interaction which environment we are in when communication with someone important matters. So the more we are, in the good to go camp, the better our chances are of having effective and productive communication. So I'll use this again. I've used it before back when we first started these sessions. I love this quote, and I refer to it in my own head often because I think it's so simple and yet so profound, from Viktor Frankl, and it is, between the stimulus and the response is a space. It is in this space that we find our power and our freedom. And it certainly holds true for communication. Without the space, we're stuck in reactivity. And with the space, we have a chance both to consider our own position and perhaps even to integrate the position of our communication partner. So it's all very similar to the theme that's been running through all of these sessions. Let's do a practice, shall we? So get yourself settled in, and as you do, allow your eyes to close, and then do just a quick body scan and sort of, notice where or if you have any areas of tension. So find a spine that's straight and flexible. So it feels supported but not rigid. And then feel a soft front. Relax your throat, relax your jaw. And just let your breathing be natural. And again, a reminder that our goal here is awake body, tender heart, open mind. Now, as we tend to do, go ahead, settle into your anchor. So sound, breath, sensation perhaps in hands and fingers. And just take a few moments to begin to deepen your experience of settling in. Now, wherever you chose to find an anchor, bring it to your breath. And as you focus on your breath, whenever you find a thought that interferes with your train of awareness, label that thought thinking and breathe out. And follow this process for a couple of moments. no matter what thoughts you have, in mindfulness, they all have equal value. So whether they are intense, seemingly urgent, or mundane, each one gets the label thinking and breathe out. So, in keeping with Viktor Frankl's notion, we're cultivating our capacity to create space, to offer ourselves and our lives some moments to allow some discernment to creep in, to take a seat at the table during our interactions, our communication, to strengthen our ability to resist the natural tendency we all have of reactivity and old patterns that have tended to dominate our communication. To allow fresh eyes to raise the voice of wisdom. So I'm going to ask you to, again, hit replay on a situation that you've been involved with in communication with another person. Probably someone who's, fairly important to your life. It doesn't have to be the closest people to you, but this setup would be this. Can you come up with a situation in which you had some either momentary or situational resistance, or perhaps even resistance based on some older, more established belief or understanding. But a situation in which you experienced some measure of like a sea change. So you might initially have been resolved at the beginning of an interaction um, to a certain way of thinking, feeling, believing, but that as the interaction proceeded, there was an influence that some way caused a pronounced shift in your outlook or attitude, and maybe even in the conclusion or the resolution, if there was a conflict. So consider for a moment a situation. It doesn't have to be the most outstanding one in the world, just some situation in which you recall that from beginning to end, your position made a noticeable shift. Maybe just a situation where you're softened a bit, or maybe where you outright realized that you were wrong or misdirected. And bring this situation into full focus. And as we do, play through it in your mind from the beginning. So recall what attitudes, ideas, feelings you brought into this scene. And then allow the tape to play. Remembering when you arrived at the point where there was a shift. And maybe you can identify the catalyst for the change as the interaction unwinds. The thoughts or feelings or facts that altered your outlook. Ask yourself, what occurred to make that shift? What did you recognize or change that caused the shift to take place? reliving this experience, can you imagine the shift in your energy that accompanied the shift in your outlook? Whether it was mental or emotional energy, maybe you even felt your heart soften or your mind soften. Can you relate that shift as going from like a condition red to yellow or even green? Where some sense of awake body or tender heart or open mind kind of appeared out of the darkness. Imagine what it would be like if you had the power to make that shift in any interaction. To be able to consciously hit the reset button and alter the dynamics of your own thoughts, feelings, reactions, almost like on the spot. So, this is the promise of mindful communication, that we build the presence to discern, to evaluate any encounter, and recognize when it's not a green condition, to possess the capacity to create the space in that moment, and to offer the very best response that you're capable of in any situation. Would you bring your attention back to rest on your breath? And we'll spend just a few minutes more engaging in this practice, this process of cultivating the ability to create space on the spot. So, following the breath, recognizing thoughts, exhaling them with the label thinking, coming back to the breath. If you're experiencing a lot of chatter, a lot of movement in your mind, just remember this, simply reflects life. A lot of times we enter into communications where there's a lot of chatter, a lot of potential distractions. And so to reflect that, we just keep working this process to continue to build our resilience. And then relax your efforts. And before you come fully back into uh, the moment here, just do a quick body scan once again and just notice whether during the course of this you took on or maybe even didn't eliminate any areas of tension. The face, the jaw, the throat, the shoulders, chest, belly, hands or feet, or heart. All right. I sure hope you found some value in today's session and that these are practices that you might employ yourself. First of all, and most importantly, taking them to your seat, taking them to the cushion, and spending some time on a daily basis in working through the practices. And then watch how they manifest in your relationships, in your communication, and throughout your life. Please be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed today's session and subscribe for additional practices and information on mindfulness, meditation, and yoga beyond the mat. Until next time, keep on breathing.